Great, Tracy. This is going along great. This is exactly what we want. I hope you're feeling that you're able to express yourself.
Well, absolutely. And I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity, because I know I represent a lot of folks out there who, want to have these kinds of conversations and debates. But I think sometimes it's people are fearful to go there and come to the table and be honest, be vulnerable, and share their viewpoints. But, one of the things that, I didn't get to share with you guys is that, I've had a major pivot in my life over the last 5 years. In March of 2019, my husband and I had a supernatural encounter with God that lasted for 10 days, and it rocked my husband's life, my life. It transformed our lives and our marriage. And we're led by one single goal, and that's just to express how the grace of God showed up in our lives by telling our story. And we wrote a book about it and published it in October of 2021. Our prayer is that our miracle story would inspire everyone to seek the God who's still writing their own story.
Welcome to Peter and Phil's Courageous Conversations, a podcast addressing race relations and social issues in hopes that you'll be inspired to do the same. Now, let's begin our conversation with your hosts, Dr. Peter Weinstein and Dr. Philip Nelson.
Welcome back to Courageous Conversations. Dr. Nelson and I are here with Tracy Dowdy to continue our conversation about, let's call it the nuclear family. And I'm going to start with the fact that I believe, based upon what we all agree upon, the nuclear family has exploded. And that the Leave It to Beaver world has no longer exists. And that the Friday, everybody coming home and having dinner has been replaced by Instacart and Grubhub. Talking about what happened in school has been replaced by go upstairs and do your homework. So I think Tracy's comments about family, and I think Phil's comments about family influencing kids, there's a lot of truth, because we do, and I've got 2 adult children, we do depend upon others to teach and raise our kids, to teach them what's right from wrong. We try, but we're also busy being busy. And with the 2-income families that most families are dealing with, and with after school events and everything else, we may contact our kids for 2 hours a day at breakfast and after dinner, just before they go to bed, because they're busy doing homework. So I think a lot of the influence of this generation of children, and I'll go from 35 and younger, has been influenced by media. And that is television media, radio media, and the internet. Because as Phil noted, the digital natives, they are using various social media resources for information. Well, each of those social media resources uses algorithms to direct the information that those viewers get. So once we allow our digital natives to seek information, they're getting, again, tainted information because it's being chosen for them. This is not always freedom. Now, if you get into some of the rooms and the listservs and everything else, you might get some other things, but this goes back, and one of the other conversations that Phil and I have had over the past 3 years is what happened to civics. We don't teach civics anymore. We really don't even teach history anymore when it comes down to it. We do focus on STEM, but we don't necessarily talk civics. And so many of the issues that we're dealing with, and I think it influences many of the young politicians, is what were they taught? I have heard both of you, and I really would love to continue this conversation and see how we're going to change this. How are we going to fix this? And how are we going to encourage more efforts to bring that chasm down from the Grand Canyon back to the crack in the sidewalk? Wow. There's a moment of silence there. Crickets.
So I was going to give Tracy a chance to respond to you first.
from my perspective, I think that we have to get back to God. That's where I think that we are missing a huge piece of this. And I understand you guys might not believe in God. You might not believe the Bible is true. We all have different walks of faith. Some people, may have no faith in a higher being and a creator, but I do. And I believe that we are created by God and we're created for God. And, I spent the majority of my career putting my career before my family. And I see now the consequences of that. And I don't necessarily regret it because, everything is a learning opportunity to improve. And I do feel that, a mother's role is to nurture her children and to be there for her children. She plays a huge, huge role. And I think the father too. But obviously, if you've got both parents who are busy and they're working and they're involved in so many things, the kids are neglected and they don't have that that ability to really know what they stand for, what their core values are. And so we are relying on, many people are relying on, I see parents now handing their kids an iPad and, as their babysitter. But yet the people who actually created social media and Silicon Valley, they don't even allow their kids to have these devices. And so I don't know what the answer is other than we need to get back to, the roots of putting the family first, putting God first. And I feel like we're in such a materialistic world where everybody is working really hard to generate money so they can have things and they can buy more things. People are focused on, wealth creation. I think they're focused on, status, popularity, power, greed, all of these things. I think at the end of the day, we come into this world with nothing and we leave the world with nothing. So what is our legacy about, really? And I think so often people don't realize that they're living in the here and now. And so I believe in an eternal existence. And so when I leave planet Earth and I'm before my maker, my creator, is he going to say, wow, that's a great resume. You did you wrote some amazing papers. You did some great talks. You created a lot of wealth. You lived in a beautiful house and, you drove nice cars and wore fancy clothes and you had a really big social media following. You influenced people to do these things. And is that really, I'm being facetious here, right? I'm being very facetious. I just think that my eternal life is what's most important to me. And if that means I get hated by others or persecuted by others because I say that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, so be it.
I don't know what to respond to first. Tracy is so eloquent in making her points, and I don't want to forget some of the things that Peter said. But I want to start with the nuclear family again. And I also want to refer back to some of the things that Tracy said that got us into this segment of the conversation, and as well as what she just said. And Peter, I don't know if you've heard this or not, and we haven't responded yet, but at one point she actually said she didn't know if we believe in God or not. I want to make sure she understands where I stand. Tracy, I am a man of faith. I do believe in God. I've read the Bible all the way through twice. I am still a student of the Bible. I am not, however, an advocate of organized religion. And that's where probably we differ a little. My experiences with God is a personal one. My discussions with my children have been on that basis because of in my opinion, the expansiveness of religion versus personal accountability that occurs in religious discussions. But that's my own personal issue, and I recognize that. Back to the nuclear family, and I was just doing that just to make sure you understood who you were talking to and to instill some comfort level to your knowing who I am. But back to the nuclear family, Tracy suggested that, and Peter did more than suggest by using an explosive term that the nuclear family is no more. I disagree. I think that the nuclear family has just evolved. And I think the definition, and frankly, a lot of what both of you said reminded me of the phrase, it takes a village. It takes a village to have a society. We are herd animals, and we cooperate in a lot of ways in order to create this great nation, in order to create the community we have, in order to create the churches that we have. There takes a collaboration and a cooperative spirit that results in the adults that our children ultimately become. So the mere act of turning our children over to government, if you will, which I think is a very crass way of describing it, because my teachers did not work for government. My teachers were there because they liked to teach. My teachers convinced me that they cared for me. My children's teachers, most of them, convinced me that they were there for the same reason. I don't understand what the agenda of teachers would be when they go to Walmart to buy notebooks and pencils and crayons and scissors and paper for children that their school budgets are unable to provide, especially on what they are paid. And sometimes I think that we, again, I'm biased because I'm in education, but I believe that we underestimate the impact of our criticism when we lump everything and conflate everyone into a sinister, demonic agenda by somebody, whether it's the press or the government or what have you. Again, all politics are local. When I got involved with my children's living, I realized I had to be a member of the PTA, and I realized that I should have joined the PTA before I had my first child. As Tracy said, we tend to learn our lessons as we grow up. I now realize that PTA members should be in maternity wards, getting new parents to join the PTA then, because it will take 6 years to affect the schools so that it will reflect what they want them to reflect when their child gets to the first grade. I think that the fact that our nuclear families have changed, Tracy, you were raised by a mom and a stepfather at one point. You know, that was not the Brady Bunch. That was not what we think of as a nuclear family. And yet it was. Many single moms who, as you said, primary purpose of a mother is to nurture. Well, that is, I say the primary purpose of parents is to nurture, but somebody has to bring in the bacon, and somebody has to bring in the bread and the bacon, et cetera. And traditionally, or at least in our history, that was the male figure. And because, and because we began to open up opportunities regardless of gender, it changed the nuclear family, which meant that we had to adjust as to how we were going to raise our children. That was a challenge for us. But that doesn't mean that the nuclear family was destroyed. When I was a child, I wasn't even allowed to make up my bed because I was a male and I was supposed to do other things. I was supposed to be raised to become a male. I see things differently now. I raise my children differently, and they will too. And Peter's discussion about the impact of social media, Tracy, your discussion about the impact of iPads, et cetera. As we progress in society, we're going to have pros and cons about all of our technological advances, that we have to learn how to apply, including the atom bomb. And the iPad is probably the atom bomb of social development. On the one hand, the internet is probably really good for us in terms of providing access to information. On the other, it's the use of that information that we just finished discussing is the bane of our existence. I don't have a solution either, Tracy. I'm just trying to say that it has always been complicated, and it takes a village to find those solutions. And we're not going to find them in narrow, trite idioms that we're so good at producing, like defund the police or Black Lives Matter, etc. The things that might capture an idea, but might also isolate or antagonize different populations.
I agree.
Oh, come on, say more than that.
Oh, I'm agreeing with you, Phil. I'm agreeing with you. And I think one topic that I want to say is that I do think that teachers are underpaid, they're undervalued, they're not appreciated. But the teachers do not decide on the curriculum that they're teaching their students. Somebody's deciding what that curriculum is. Someone is deciding and mandating to those teachers what they are to do in the schools and in the classrooms. And that is where I see a huge problem. And I don't think being a member of PTA is going to solve that problem, because parents can't control what the curriculum is that's going to be taught in schools.
I totally disagree with that. Parents can control it the same way parents are controlling it now or not controlling it now.
I hear you. And I, now having, being in Tulsa, I have been involved in some activities and some organizations where, some of the solutions that are being given to the audiences that I've been in is that we have to get involved at the grassroots level. And there's been a lot of advice on attending school board meetings. Even if you don't have any children in schools, go to the school board meetings and have a voice. Go to city council meetings. Get involved. Get involved in politics at the grassroots level. Be on committees. Run for positions, open positions in your district. And I think that is an excellent call to action, because if we have people who all have the same sort of mindset, activistic mindset, that's not good for any community. There has to be some diversity, and the people who are coming to the table and who are giving up their time, their volunteer time and their efforts, so that there can be, good decisions that are made based on a variety of perspectives and worldviews.
I totally agree with you. Unfortunately, I just can't leave it there, because I want to make sure that it includes, as you said, diversity. You've raised critical race theory several times in our discussion, and I haven't addressed it yet. But I do want to say that I think we should be careful about just about the influence of what is being taught in school. I still think that we're still teaching the basic arithmetic and math and writing, and reading and writing. And I think that those are the predominant topics that are focused on in K through 12. I need to back up a little bit. A suggestion was made that we're teaching our children not to be proud of our country. I disagree. I think that we're changing the narrative. You keep talking about the narrative. The old narrative was, and excuse my use of the word, whitewashed. But the old narrative was that the American history was very simple, and our patriots didn't have any faults. And in my public education, there was very little discussion about the role of my people in American history. Now, you particularly mentioned that the students of today are taught to be ashamed of what they did with Black people. Well, my children are those students too. And I'm not quite sure that what they're being taught is to be ashamed of what they did to Black people, and they're Black. I think what they were being taught is what happened to Black people. Now, if they if they're embarrassed by that or ashamed by that, that's not the intent of the information. It is to make sure that we are aware of it so that we can deal with it differently as we move forward, so that we can explain how we got here. You asked the question uh, uh, earlier in a discussion when we were talking about George Floyd. You said, "Why him? Why did that one blow up? Is that the only person who suffered from police brutality?" And you asked that question after hearing our presentation, the presentation with me and Peter, where I shared 3 episodes of police brutality. So one rather mild, one rather violent, and one more political. I see them all as police brutality. But that is why it blew up. It's not because it was that one, it was because that one happened to make the video, but it represented a common experience across the globe. And it tended to represent it tended to expose a tendency across a profession. And that had been, in my opinion, buried. So the point I'm trying to make is that as far as critical race theory is concerned, and you mentioned that Black parents say, we don't want people focusing on this all the time. I don't. I don't want it taught at the elementary schools, but I do want to teach human pride to all of the students. And at some point, you do teach social history. And at some point, you do discuss theories, critical race theory being one of them. I wouldn't necessarily think I'm going to subject it to kindergarteners or K through 12 students, or maybe 12th grade students. I don't know that. I am not a K through 12 educator. I'm a higher ed educator.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to tell you about a story of a friend of mine recently shared with her an experience that her children went through regarding white privilege. The teacher put the children all in a single file line, and she started to separate the children by steps according to how their social economic background. They started with color of their skin, whether both of their parents were still married, whether their parents went to college, whether they made a certain amount of money. The list went on. And I don't remember all of the questions, but I was pretty floored by the fact that this friend of mine, her child.
What grade was this, by the way?
It was high school. High school, or it might have been first year of college. And the child, this child said, "Mom, I felt so like she was made to feel, because both of her parents were still married. Both of her parents were college educated. Both of her parents were career people and who had a successful life and had reached a certain social economic status and were both white. She was separated from everybody else in the group. She was ostracized in this exercise, and came home and complained about, why am I being singled out because of where my family comes from? Is that okay?
So let me ask you a question. At what point should she learn the socioeconomic impact of the things that do affect our advances?
I'm not saying that she can't. There can't be a.
I'm sorry. I'm asking at what point should she learn that?
I think there's nothing wrong with her learning it. I think it was the way in which there was an undertone of the exercise.
So you're saying the exercise was poorly designed and did not take into account the impact it might have on the individual who might actually be privileged or might end up isolated because of the advantages that a person might have. Obviously it wasn't thought through, and I understand that. I agree with that. Now, the real question is, that is an example. How common is it? How common is that? Does that occur? Don't get me wrong. I do feel for that individual student.
Don't we call that profiling?
It's exactly what it was.
And don't we do it all? And don't we do it all the time, either consciously or unconsciously?
There may be a softer way of teaching it, but at some point, if you truly learn the lesson, you truly learn where you fall on that scale.
But I don't think people should feel guilty for having hardworking parents who went through blood, sweat, and tears.
I don't
where
either.
They are today.
I don't either. But I don't think that was the intent of the session.
Well, that's how she felt.
I understand. I can't control how you react to something, other than to help guide you through it. But that doesn't diminish the importance of understanding how I got here.
It's interesting, Phil, because we started this conversation earlier, a little while ago, about family.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of the issues, and including the one Tracy just explained, really should be part of dinner conversation and education and sharing, and that there are people who are different backgrounds, different socioeconomics, different faiths, religions, etc. And even different discussions on news of the day. Do we sit down and talk to our kids about the news of the day, what's going on? And when we have those conversations, are we being directing, or are we sharing information? And I really do think that part of this conversation about the nuclear family, which I blew up at early on in the conversation, is part of where we learn. I would suggest that in many cases, Tracy's upbringing and the challenges she had included conversations about the news of the day, as did mine. They may have come from two different perspectives, but it doesn't mean we can't sit down and talk about them in a civil fashion.
Thank you for joining us for another courageous conversation. Be sure to follow us and check back next week for more.